for 5 months, even though I was in the first grade. I entered web chat rooms often. My curiosity about the content on these sites has pushed me to spend more time here before and after classes, after my basketball practices, and even before going to bed, especially when you are in communication with a user. These sites have become even more attractive at first. The user was joking about what was happening here, while sharing funny videos and having pleasant conversations. However, a month later, everything changed. One day, on a video feed, I came across a terrifying scene. A woman was bound with chains and her mouth was gagged. I lost control watching him. A feeling of anxiety and fear that was growing inside me enveloped me. I tried to turn off the video, but suddenly, something else started happening. A man appeared on the camera, and this time we were in the middle of a terrible collection. There were creepy tools like a saw, a gun and a razor. The guy suddenly started talking and included me. This was like a kind of torture game, an event where many people had to choose a sixth option and use a razor. The moment this moment started to become a complete nightmare came when he began to approach the skull of the woman who appeared as the fourth option. I managed to regain control of myself and managed to turn off the video. However, he smiled and I went back to the more terrifying content that the same man directed to the video while I was in a state of fear and bewilderment. I couldn't get my hands on anything and I didn't hear anything other than the camera. At that moment, a new scene appeared, featuring a gun with a barrel, a bat, and a flamethrower. I couldn't hear the woman's screams. The video became even more terrifying, and I started to lose control. I made a last effort to regain control of myself, but nothing more happened. The woman's screams of fear and the man's violent actions had become all-encompassing. At that moment, it seemed like the culmination of torture. The woman's screams were fused with the terrible tools on the video screen, and the man's cruel actions. At that moment, my eyes were shaking and my heart was beating fast. I was in a desperate effort to regain control of myself, but no matter what I did, nothing changed. Everything was out of my control. The woman's screams of fear and the man's violent actions had become all-encompassing. I didn't know how time passed. I was just trapped in fear and horror. Finally, I managed to get out, hoping that this nightmare would end. But this experience has affected me deeply. My interest in web chat rooms has changed radically. I was no longer interested in this kind of content and wanted to forget this terrible experience. One day, I noticed that someone else was in my room. He was like a being lurking decently among the shadows. I could not understand who he was and for what purpose he was here. This shows that the story has become even more complicated. They separated Natal, and quickly I could hear him. That's all I got for you. Then there was no sound. He had stopped. He was dead. The screen then went back to normal. The camera focused on the barrel. Two men were standing right in front of us, looking at a castle and breathing deeply. This woman, she could have put it into words. But it was a terrible sight. A passenger screamed this year. Then Egypt sat in complete silence for a while. Now, that wasn't it. Most recently, I really enjoyed it on the internet last year because in a strange way, and I'm not the only one. There are a lot of people who are in the same situation. This is much more than what you force them to do, so be careful before you go to the port. It's not a good atmosphere, but we're at a level comparable to the business package here, and you'll see that I recently came across a YouTube video. While exploring the deep web, I'm sorry, I started watching. But I prefer not to say the name of the video or the video. I mean, the YouTube channel. I don't get paid for product placement, anyway, but in short, I watched this video that tells me how to get to 10 points without taking too many precautions and informing myself about what I need to do, especially so as not to make mistakes. The big mistake, I have to tell you, is that I know that using Windows on web types is a very bad idea, given that it is considered one of the most famous operating systems, so it can be quickly noticed, and thanks to Windows, I can have Sailors and Linux. A Le Mans USB key 25 Google search can tell you how to do this, and it's not as difficult as it sounds. Then I realized that if my computer was running, I was in big trouble, and I really couldn't let myself get a new one, because I can't afford bandages. At that time I thought it would be good to access it using my Android tablet. Isn't it brilliantly managed? I'm an idiot, and of course I want to point out that you are an Android tablet. A PC or Linux will never go to the waiting question for the dark web. That's why I was able to quickly access 10 of them, claiming that after downloading several VPNs, you could actually get their poems with a background, like a child lost in a store for adults. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was a little interested in all of them. Everything seemed very interesting to me, and I knew very well that I could easily find the drugs, DP strange delusions about water, so I still did all of them, but unfortunately I'm not going to say which one. I fell into one of the things, but it made me so sick that I almost told myself that it was so. It was just bad luck, and I was going to be more careful in the future. I'm not a guy who has suffered an unhealthy defeat about Scotland and, damn it, I think these images I've seen will stay forever no matter what. When I was a 19-year-old teenager, I used to spend all my time on the internet and downloaded an app called Discord on my laptop. One day I met someone through this application. His name was UDC. We started talking to each other immediately and were spending time together almost every day. Over time, the bond between us and UDC started to strengthen in December deck. One day UDC asked me to show how I looked. I was hesitant at first, but eventually I sent him a photo of me. He said I was beautiful and noticed that I had started dyeing my hair black and had stopped using eyeliner. He appreciated these changes, and the bond between us became even deeper. A week later, UDC admitted that they felt, and I was harboring the same feelings. I also noticed that she is an attractive Lucy and always wears a mask. This gave him an air of mystery and different from other people. A week later, UDC admitted that they felt, and I was harboring the same feelings. I also noticed that she is an attractive Lucy and always wears a mask. This gave him an air of mystery and different from other people. Over time, the UDC began to ask more and more personal questions, and this worried me a little. However, I told him that I live in California, and he said that he would like to meet one day. We continued to talk every day, and the bond between us became even stronger. But one night when my parents went on a trip to celebrate their 20th anniversary, I was home alone and things started to get scary. That night, as I was sitting in my room, I heard a click from the window behind me. I realized that I had forgotten to close the blinds, and I thought that children were playing outside in my neighborhood. As I approached the window, my heart started beating fast, but when I looked at the window, I couldn't see anyone. It was just a little moment of tension, and I was relieved. That night I received a message on my phone. UDC was saying that he wanted to see me, and that he wanted to visit me. But how could he know that I was alone in my house? This situation worried me. I told him that it was scary, and that I shouldn't do such a thing. I also asked how he found my address. UDC said it found my exact location through Discord. This made me even more uncomfortable, but we didn't talk about it anymore. A few minutes later, I heard a young man's voice outside. The voice was quite attractive, and I realized that this person was UDC. I started to get worried and told him to leave me alone. However, he kept approaching my door. Finally, I gathered my courage and opened the door. When I looked at the shadow by the door, I saw a smiling face there. He bit his lips, and it scared me. I told him to leave. But he stood there in silence. Suddenly, he started stepping in front of me. With a knife in his hand, I panicked and started running away. He gave chase. But I managed to hide in a bush. I managed to call the police immediately. Finally, the cops came. But it was the icy gaze of that teenager that impressed the most. As a result, this experience has affected me a lot, and I have learned that I need to be careful. Goodbye. See you in other stories.